I never thought moving into a quiet neighborhood with my 2 rescue horses would turn into a nightmare. I just wanted peace. After years of working undercover as a federal wildlife agent, dealing with poachers and smugglers, I figured a small town with a tight-knit community and a little pasture would be perfect for healing both for me and my animals. But I didn't account for one thing. Karen from the HOA, from the first day. Karen made it clear she didn't want the horses there. She complained about everything: the smell, the fence, even the sound of them walking. I tried to be civil, thinking she was just another nosy neighbor with too much time. But it wasn't just pettiness. It turned into full-blown harassment. Warnings, fines, threats of legal action. All over to rescue horses that had been through more trauma than most people could imagine. I thought I'd seen the worst in my line of work. But nothing prepared me for what came next. One morning, I walked out to feed them, and everything was quiet. Too quiet. The pasture gate was open. Both horses were lying still. I ran, heart pounding, but it was too late. They were gone. Poison. The vet said. Deliberate, calculated. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred. Whoever did this had crossed a line they couldn't come back from. That was the moment. I stopped being the quiet new neighbor. Karen didn't know who I was. She thought I was just some retired nobody. She had no idea about my badge, my training, or the kind of cases I'd worked. But that was about to change. Because when someone murders your animals, your family, you don't just walk away. You dig, you fight. And when you have federal authority behind you, you make sure justice gets served. And just when I thought I had the full story, a single security cam clip changed everything. What I saw in that footage turned this from a neighborhood feud into something much darker. The footage came from a neighbor across the street, someone Karen probably thought was on her side. He'd installed a small camera for package thefts, but forgot to turn it off one night. When I knocked on his door, asking if he saw anything strange, he hesitated, then nodded and handed over a USB. He didn't say much. Just that I should watch. It alone. I waited until I got home, locked the door, and plugged it in. At first, it was just shadows. Then I saw movement near the gate. A figure in a hoodie. Not Karen, someone else. They moved fast, like they'd done this before. They had gloves and something small in their hand. I paused the frame. A bottle. That's when my stomach dropped. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was planned. I rewound and looked closer. In the background, barely lit by a street lamp, stood Karen. Arms crossed, watching. She never stepped in, never stopped it. Just stood there and let it happen. That's when things shifted. This wasn't just about a grudge over neighborhood, rules, or a personal dislike. Something deeper was going on. And I knew it had nothing to do with horses. They were just a cover for something much bigger. I started digging. Old emails from the HOA, property maps, zoning complaints. I found inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. Karen had pushed out 2 other neighbors before me, both under strange circumstances and both owned land just like mine. It seemed like a pattern, but why? The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it felt. People who were once chatty stopped answering my calls. One neighbor quietly slipped me a note. Don't trust the board. It's not just Karen. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't acting alone. I couldn't sleep after that. Every sound outside made me jump. I started noticing small things: tire tracks by the side fence, someone knocking and leaving before I got to the door. Odd silence on the HOA group chat where Karen used to post daily rants. It felt like the whole neighborhood had turned cold overnight. But I wasn't backing down. If anything, I was more determined to expose whatever they were hiding. I pulled old meeting records from the county office and started going through them. That's when I stumbled on a strange set of notes about land acquisition. Apparently, the HOA had been quietly buying up small plots on the edge of the neighborhood, all under a shell company. My land, it was right in the middle of that stretch. The moment I moved in with the rescue horses, their plan hit a wall. That's when the pressure started. The fines, the threats, the poisoning. They wanted me gone. I started suspecting that this wasn't just about property lines. There was something else tied to that land. I dug deeper and found a preliminary proposal buried in city archives, a private development plan for a luxury golf resort. It was never officially submitted, just mentioned in closed-door meetings. But the land they needed, it matched the exact lots being targeted. Suddenly, Karen's obsession made sense. She wasn't just a bitter neighbor with two. Much time she was part of something bigger, and she was willing to play dirty to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, I started getting strange calls. No one would speak, just silence. Once, my tires were slashed while I was parked at a grocery store. I reported it, but the officer looked uncomfortable, like he knew more but wouldn't say. It felt like I was being watched from every angle. And then, late one night, I found a plain envelope taped to my back door. Inside was a photo, a blurry shot of me at the stables. And a single line scribbled across the bottom. Back off before you end up like them. I held that photo in my hands for a long time, my fingers trembling. It wasn't just a threat, it was proof. Someone had been watching me up close, too close. They knew where I lived, what I did, when I moved around. This wasn't just about land anymore, it was personal now. And whoever they were, they wanted to scare me into silence. The next few days were a blur. I tightened security, changed locks, and set up motion cameras around my property. I stopped going out at night and kept my phone on me at all times. Every noise made me freeze. I couldn't tell who to trust anymore, not even the local police. One officer I had spoken to before suddenly transferred out. Another pretended not to recognize me at all. It was like they were all being told to stay quiet. Karen, meanwhile, vanished from the neighborhood. Her car didn't move. Her blinds stayed shut. No HOA posts. Nothing. It was as if she'd gone underground right when things started heating up. But I had a feeling she hadn't gone far. People like her don't just disappear. They wait. They calculate. I started following the paper trail. The shell company behind the land purchases was tied to a law firm 3 counties over, one known for handling backdoor real estate deals. I called a friend still active in federal enforcement and asked for help tracing the company. What he found chilled me. Some of the board members from my HOA were also listed as silent partners. That explained the push, the hostility, the silence. Then one of the neighbors who'd helped me early on, the one with the security footage, stopped answering his door. I called. No response. I went by again and found his front door cracked open. Lights off. No sign of him. In the center of the living room sat another envelope, just like the one I got. I picked it up with gloves and opened it slowly. Inside was another photo, this time of him, bound and gagged, with today's date written in red ink underneath. That's when I knew. Whatever was happening here wasn't just a fight over property. It was a war. And I was deep in the middle of it. I backed out of that house immediately. Heart pounding, every instinct screaming that I was being watched. I didn't call the cops this time. I knew they wouldn't help. Instead, I drove to a gas station 2 towns over, parked in the back lot, and opened my laptop. I uploaded the photo, ran facial recognition through my agency's old network. Access it was a long shot. But something told me this went beyond local greed. What came back made my skin go cold. One of the silent partners listed on the shell company wasn't just a local investor. He was flagged years ago in a sealed federal investigation tied to illegal wildlife trafficking. A case that never went to trial because the key witnesses disappeared. Tama. And now that name was directly linked to my HOA board. My horses. They weren't just collateral damage. They were a message. I started thinking back. Every little thing suddenly had new meaning. Karen's obsession with the horses, the coded threats, the way she backed off right when things escalated. It wasn't just her being a controlling neighbor. She was protecting something or someone. And if the man from the photo was the same person behind the shell company, then she wasn't the one pulling the strings. She was being used. Or maybe willingly helping. The pieces were falling into place, but fast and too perfectly. Something felt off. That's when I noticed an unfamiliar SUV parked outside my place in the security feed from just 2 hours earlier. Same vehicle had passed me twice on the highway earlier that day. My location wasn't as hidden as I thought. I contacted my old field partner, used a secure line. I told him everything. He was silent for a second, then said, "You're not going to like this, but your name came up in a flagged conversation intercepted last week. Someone's looking for leverage against a former agent. They knew you'd dig." And then, right. As I ended the call, a new notification popped up on my phone. My barn motion camera had gone dark. Camera offline. Someone was already there. I raced back home without thinking. Headlights off, sticking to the back roads. My tires kicked up dust as I approached the property. I parked down the block, slipped through a neighbor's yard, and made my way behind the barn. The motion camera was still offline. My heart was pounding in my chest like it knew something I didn't. From the corner of the barn, I saw movement to figures inside with flashlights. I recognized one of them instantly. Karen, the other was a man I hadn't seen before, but his face matched the one from the flagged report. Miles, the developer tied to the illegal wildlife ring. They were arguing, their voices low but tense. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. "He wasn't supposed to keep digging," Karen hissed. "You said he was just a quiet nobody." "He was, until you killed the damn horses," Miles snapped. "Now he's a problem. A big one." I stepped inside slowly, gun drawn but badge out, heart racing. "Federal agent, don't move." They both froze. Karen turned, her face pale. "You don't understand." "No, Karen," I said. "I understand everything. The land grab, the shell company, the poisoned horses. You sold out your neighbors to help cover up for a man under federal investigation." Miles lunged, fired. A warning shot into the ground. He dropped like a coward, hands up. Within minutes, my backup arrived to agents I'd called after my partner flagged the call. Miles was arrested on the spot. Karen. She was cuffed, silent, staring at the barn floor like she finally realized how far she'd fallen. But just when I thought it was over, one of the agents pulled me aside. "You might want to see this," he said, holding up a second file. It was another sealed case. A different neighborhood, a different name, same pattern, same shell company, and the photo inside. A young woman, looked exactly like Karen, but 10 years younger. "She's not who she says she is," the agent whispered. "This goes way deeper than we thought." And just like that, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The truth unraveled quickly after that night. Karen, whose real name was Lauren Harper, had changed her identity years ago after being tied to a federal land fraud case in another state. She resurfaced here under a new name, climbing her way into the HOA to control land and quietly help push forward illegal developments. Robert Miles was just one of several key players. The case expanded fast. More names came out, more communities affected. The federal team took over the investigation, and this time, no one slipped through the cracks. My neighbor, the one who helped with the footage, was found in an abandoned property on the edge of town, alive but shaken. He's safe now, part of witness protection, just in case. He never expected to be part of something this dark, but he's glad he spoke up. Most of the HOA board resigned within a week once the arrests began. Some claimed they had no idea, others lawyered up, but the damage was already done. I stayed. I rebuilt the barn, kept the land, and adopted 2 more rescue horses from a shelter that had heard my story. The community changed too. People came out of hiding. Neighbors started talking. Again, and for the first time since I moved in, it felt like home. Quiet, respectful, peaceful, just like I hoped. Looking back, the biggest lesson was this: evil doesn't always look like a criminal in the shadows. Sometimes it wears a polite smile, sits on the HOA board, and waves at you from across the street. But when you know what to look for and you're willing to stand your ground. Truth can't hide forever, so if you ever feel something's off in your neighborhood, trust your gut. And remember, justice sometimes shows up in boots, not a badge.